Hi everyone. This is my first time doing this, so please bear with me. Just be gentle. Um, there was a young little boy. There was a young boy who lived in the east part of Ghana, in a small town near a large metropolitan area. As he was growing up, he knew his mother, but she was rarely around to care for him. He never knew who his father was. His mother would sometimes take him with her while she spent short periods of time with other men at their places. But mostly, this young boy would stay with his cousins or grandmother. His grandmother was his primary caretaker and teacher about life matters. She raised 8 children, and these children grew up. Some lived in Ghana, and others in other parts of Europe, raising their own families. She was a reserved, church-going woman who had a hard life, working on a small plot of land and selling clothes in a marketplace. She showed by example her expectations for living, but many of her children didn't follow her ways, nor did their kids. With this grandson of hers, she took a strong approach. She would wake him up daily at 4 a.m. and pray with him. At 5 a.m., she would take her little grandson with her and walk 10 miles to church. Whenever her grandson would ask, "Why do we have to walk to church every day when other children are at home asleep?" She would respond, "I'm taking you to church because it's the house of God and it's the only place that God can bless and favor you so you can have a better future than mine." The pastor at her church took a good look at her grandson. He noted to her that this little boy was special, that he had a potential for greatness. The grandmother took these words to heart, and she would echo to the boy, "You have greatness in you, and you will walk in God's ways." The boy's grandmother kept him by her side to pray at home and at church. She would constantly remind him that to earn respect and to show greatness, he needed to demonstrate respect toward elders and persons in authority, such as teachers, community leaders, and adult family members, by addressing them as sir or ma'am. She reminded him to show appreciation towards everyone and work extremely hard. When the boy didn't tell the truth, she would admonish him and hit him with her cane. When he was coerced away to play soccer and ignore his house chores and schoolwork, she would admonish him and hit him with her cane. When he hung out with cousins or other kids who were a bad influence, she would admonish him and hit him with her cane. But always, she was echoing to the boy, "You have greatness in you. You will walk in God's ways." These words became this boy's mantra. Over the years, the boy was shuttled from one place to another. He didn't have much in the way of proper clothing. He didn't have shoes much of the time. His schooling was often interrupted due to moving households and later to help take care of younger siblings that came along. Circumstances were such that he was bullied, but always he would remember the words his grandmother echoed, "You have greatness in you, and you will walk in God's ways. God blessed this boy with physical talent. He could move and kick with focus and agility. At a young age, he, along with most Ghanaian boys, started playing soccer, barefoot, running in the grass or mud. He danced around the soccer field with such skill that he turned heads. This boy worked hard at honing his soccer skills day and night, and it earned him opportunities to get scholarships attending boarding schools in Ghana. By the time he was 14 years old, he barely saw his mother. She had a habit, ever since he was very little, of complaining to him about how much time and how much it cost to care for him. In fact, this boy had just been given an honor, being invited to join other selected boys to represent their country in international soccer games in San Francisco. When this boy's mother heard about the invitation, she said to him, "Go, but don't come back. I can't take care of you anymore." The boy had barely seen any of Ghana, never mind going across the oceans alone. He was excited about the opportunity to play the soccer tournament, but overwhelmed by the thought of being on his own in a strange place. Remember, he was only 14 years old. He held on tightly to the words his grandmother had echoed. "You have greatness in you, and you will walk in God's ways." So he traveled. For over a year after the competition ended, the boy bounced from one living situation to another. He crisscrossed the United States, from San Francisco, California, to the Bronx, New York, to Lawrence, Kansas, to Baltimore, Maryland, and finally to Worcester, Massachusetts. No friends, no school, no family, and no money. In the Bronx, the young man who he lived with was scraping by. He did everything he could so this boy could get into school, but failed because the boy's visa had expired. Very soon, he realized that this boy couldn't look for work, even under the table, because he was too young. Reluctantly, he had to let him go because the boy was becoming too much of a burden to him. The boy was excited to go to Kansas to stay with a man who knew his biological father back in the days. He was very excited that someone was willing to take him in. The boy felt blessed, and though apprehensive, he found a means to bus to Kansas after thanking the young, good man in the Bronx. It was winter time when this boy arrived in Lawrence, Kansas. The weather was bone-chilling cold. The boy had never experienced cold like that, coming from a subtropical Ghana. The man who took him in showed no care or interest in the boy. The boy was kept at home all day long, doing chores and caring for the man's young children. The boy longed to go to school, but the man refused to discuss school. The boy was often told to wash the man's cars. The boy would be out in the bitter cold air with wet, frozen red hands, which pained him hours later. If the man and his wife argued, which they often do, the boy was told to go outside and stand in the cold until it was done. When the man's wife begged the man to lighten up the harsh treatment of the boy, the man would respond, "He sleeps for free. He pays no bills. Let him learn the hard way." One Sunday, the man's wife took the boy and the family to church. The next Sunday, when the family decided not to go to church, the boy asked if he could go to church. The man's wife agreed and got ready to drive him as the weather was snowy. Her husband intervened, announcing if he wants to go to church, when nobody wants to go, then he should find a way to get there. So the boy walked 15 miles to church and would frequently do so. Church was the only place he could find peace and company. Neighbors would see him walking and offer to give him a lift, but he said no, because the man warned him the first day he arrived in Kansas that if he got in anybody's car or told them about himself or his story, they'll report him to authorities and he would get deported. This boy knew he could not go back home. He was on his own. He felt he could only possibly return to his family when he could prove to himself and others that he had greatness in him and would no longer be a burden to anyone. The boy eventually disclosed his plight to a church member with the gift of bus fare and a contact in Baltimore. The boy was gone again, promising himself never, ever to be demeaned and threatened as he had by the man in Kansas. The boy only stayed a short time in Baltimore. It was safe, welcoming environment, but the couple was splitting up. The boy again had to move on. This time, with a connection to a family, he ended up in Worcester, Massachusetts. It seemed like a perfect match. The head of the household owned a triple-decker. The boy was to share space with an older man who needed some help in preparing chores and in preparing meals and lighting up chores. The head of the household agreed to enroll the boy in a local high school. The boy started to meet kids at a nearby park and started playing soccer again. 1 month into staying in Worcester, the boy was invited to join a loosely organized soccer team that competed in the Worcester World Cup. While playing, he got noticed by a soccer coach from a traveling team that offered a full scholarship to play. He enrolled in his local high school, being placed in honors level classes and playing on a varsity team. He made friends, many of them team players. The boy was taken under the wing of an out-of-state couple whose son played on the traveling team. They would bring him clothing, shoes, and school supplies. They cheered him on at soccer games just as they did their own son. He felt welcomed and accepted. But then, the head of his household in Worcester became unreasonable. He stepped up his expectations for chores and wanted the boy additionally to pay him rent by getting a job. The boy was already completing chores. He had little time to do more given his school and sports schedules. The boy tried in vain to seek jobs. Not having papers, he couldn't apply. The boy could not sleep. He became very anxious. His host kept pressuring him and finally threatened to report him to immigration service. All the recent personal rewards and successes, all his growing happiness and sense of security seemed ready to vanish. The boy thought about the words his grandmother used to say to him and drew strength in believing her words. They gave him courage to share his situation with some staff at his school. The boy began to feel empowered as offers of support came his way. The boy shortly thereafter moved in with a school staff person and her family, now his family. Over the past 10 years, the boy from Ghana, with God's favor, worked hard to finish high school. He stretched his soccer skills to the point that he played on a Division One team at a prestigious college and finished with a bachelor's degree, the first in his family, and became a U.S. citizen. The boy, now a young man, has grown to accept his grandmother's words. His faith has built a trust now that drives a more directed faith and focus. The birth of his child has given him another means to crystallize his faith and focus and feel a sense of responsibility, not only to succeed for himself, but to contribute to the community. At this point, the young man from Ghana, with God's favor, is working hard to provide for his daughter, to continue with his education, to think about and actively encourage others to have faith in themselves and serve his community. Reflecting on his experience, he continues to assess his responses to these 5 questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? Why am I here on earth? What can I do? Where am I going? I wish, even if you don't remember a single word of this tale, you will recall the grandmother who instilled great values into her grandson and went on, literally, the extra mile to make great sacrifices with the hope that he will have a better opportunity that she has had. The message to take away is, we all need to build people, not buildings. Because people outlast buildings. In other words, we need to build on what we are, not who we are. Thank you, and may God bless you.